Hi, everybody. Welcome to Smarter News. And before we jump into this conversation today that I'm super excited about, I just want to give you a little bit of background as to how this all came together. As a journalist, sometimes you stumble into interviews, through really heavy investigative reporting and research. And other times you're just doom scrolling on Instagram, which is exactly what I was doing just a few days ago when I came across something really cool. It's a new weighted vest for women, and it was created by this company, GORUCK. And we're going to dig into all of this, I promise. But let me just untangle this little part. So, this new weighted vest for women that's part of this company that really was the pioneer for bringing rucking to the mainstream. It's called the SPY RUCK. And it's called the SPY RUCK because one of the co-founders of the company is a spy. She's our guest today. I'm not going to keep it a secret. And her other co-founder happens to be her husband, who also served this country. And so this is a veterans-owned company. And there's so many great parts of this story. And I thought, man, this is going to be such a great interview. I got to reach out to Emily and get a little bit of her background as a spy, learn a little bit about this weighted vest because it's totally in vogue right now. And I'm excited about it. And you know what? Maybe we can air this interview around Veterans Day, right? That sounds good, right? It's veterans-owned company. Veterans Day. Jason McCarthy, the co-founder of the company, served as the U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret, and Emily McCarthy, the other co-founder, was a spy. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute. If for Veterans Day, if you serve the country as a spy, are you included under the umbrella of Veterans Day? And I found out you're not, which intellectually makes sense, right? Veterans Day is
Mm.
for the military. But somehow I just have felt this is unfair. And that's why even more, I wanted Emily McCarthy, the co-founder of GORUCK, a former spy, mom of three, innovator, founder, wife, to come and talk to us, particularly on this week, because it only seems fair, Emily. I felt there was injustice with that. I thought you could serve as a spy in West Africa and you don't get your own day, Emily? Like that doesn't seem fair. I
Y
know you didn't do
you
it
know,
for the
we're
recognition, but I was surprised.
you're right. I get that a lot, and I get some people on the side being like, "Thank you for your service," when that day comes up, but when it comes down to it, the difference, I think, is that someone like Jason or your husband or other veterans, they couldn't have walked away from that contract that they made, and if
Mm,
they did, they're being AWOL, and I they make it hard to leave when you're in the agency and other places in the intel community, but it's not impossible. You're not gonna go to jail if you decide to leave. So I think that's a big differentiator for me. But I will say that it is very adjacent.
yes.
And, again, if you are killed in the line of duty, you get a star on the wall at Langley. And there are lots of there's a lot of similarities and parallels to that line of work, but I did wanna bring up that the difference that I saw with Jason when he was going through really, like, tough times in the training that when he was saying, "Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I don't wanna do this." It was a time of war when he enlisted. There was nowhere to go,
Mhm.
and I remember talking him off a few ledges, to say, "Hey, you signed up for this. You gotta stick with it. You can do it." And he did, of
And he did,
course.
and you did. And I wanna hear
Yes.
more about how both of you decided to serve your country in your own ways, and thank you for that explanation. I think that is actually something very interesting I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily think of right away about the choices that are available once you decide to serve in the military versus other government agencies that you could serve and be part of, but all of it is pretty extraordinary, and your story is an extraordinary one. And so let's just start with the spy part because we can get to the spy
Sure.
ruck and the weighted vest and
Mhm.
everything that's been done with Go Ruck, and I'm excited to dig into that. But when did you first decide that you wanted to be a spy?
That is such a great question. Never fully made that decision until I was already in it. And the thing is Jason and I went to high school together. We were very competitive with each other. We never dated, but I used to babysit his younger brother and sister. His mom was my tennis coach. We were on the tennis team. We both were, typical eldest child, striver, achievers. And after college, we kind of just kept in touch. Uh, After college, he reached out to me and said, "Yeah, I noticed that Emily, you're, serving abroad in like a volunteer capacity. I served with Catholic Relief Services in Ecuador in an impoverished community right after graduating. And he said, I'm going to do some service of my own too. And here I was thinking he was going to join the Peace Corps. And he told me, I'm enlisting in the Army. I mean, the war had started, was underway. 9/11 was the impetus for Jason joining. I didn't have that same reaction right away. I was very moved. I was actually in the Watergate building when the Pentagon got hit and went to ground zero within 2 weeks afterwards. So it did affect me and a lot of our generation, but I wasn't immediately sucked into it. And of course, Jason's enlisting didn't mean that he was just sent to, there was a process. He had to get trained, go through basic training, go through all the schools. He was with the 18 X-ray program, which was basically street to Green Beret on a pretty quick path. And him doing that along the way, I was just curious, and he had already sort of investigated all these other options, and he was the one who first posed it to me. He said we were actually having breakfast, at some diner here in our hometown in Jacksonville, Florida, and he said, "You should join the CIA." And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if that's for me." But he's like, "No, you got the language skills. Like, I think you'd be perfect for it." And so the language thing stuck out to me. I was a French major, Spanish minor, had just got back from South America, was kind of looking for my next step. I was teaching Spanish and coaching cross country at our old high school. And I just threw my resume out there as it to be a language teacher at the CIA because I thought that would be fun. I could go teach I could
And
go teach the
and so is the beginning of every good movie. I just wanted to be a language instructor, and then I wound up in West Africa. We're
That's
negotiating with
exactly what
rebel
happened.
leaders, and there it is.
And
And
that's what happened. So, long story short, the, 2 fast forward 2.5 years of background checks, polygraphs, and all sorts of interviews, vetting process, not two-way vetting process, let me say. I was like the whole way saying, "I'm not sure I wanna do this." And it was an interesting experience because 'cause I'd show up to these interviews and I'd almost be interviewing them as well to say, "Well, what is it like? I wanna know more," And some of these folks entertain that, and I remember this one guy, he had just been grounded from being in Afghanistan, he was pissed to be in the recruitment cycle, uh,
and
and
being
he
grounded means that he was brought back or part
yeah, I
working
think he
in-house.
had a health issue, he was, like,
Mhm,
medically grounded,
mhm.
so, he was kind of, like, in a little timeout, rest and relaxation, and he was just interviewing people like me, and I remember just got so angry, and he said, "Listen, you know, don't pad your intel, never sell out your source, and, just giving me this advice on, like, these things to do, and I remember walking away from the interview being like, "I think I'm in."
That's it. That's all it took, go.
I think that's all it took, So, yeah, I was skeptical throughout the process, and then I got into the training and realized this is really fun. Um, Another aspect of it
What was fun about it?
yeah.
What kind of
Well, a
resonated
funny
with you during that
a
time?
funny part of it is that I got recruited and they were pushing there's all these it's a big organization, like any government place, and there's lots of different roles you can have, and I didn't understand the nuance of all the roles that could be had in that. So once I found out some of them, I was trying to set myself up to actually Jason, we had gotten married at this point, and so I thought, "I'm gonna actually, try to get in a position where I can be supportive of him, still have a career, but also if he ever came to join me, we could be a tandem couple."
Mhm.
What those things sound better in theory. I kept, after all the personality tests and sort of the training, I kept getting pushed to be a case officer, which is basically you're an intel officer on the front lines. You're actually living abroad, you're meeting with sources, you're recruiting assets that can be of value to, national security. And, my plans to be like in a reports writer or like you said like earlier, a teacher just wasn't then their plan. And so I eventually came around to that, and that line of work, I think they were right because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the role playing that you have with the recruitment cycle. I the spy school aspect of, you know, emergency medicine, learning to shoot, learning how to, we joke in our house, our kids sometimes will say, "Mom, Dad, who's the better driver of you two?" And I'll say, "Well, kids, one of your parents has graduated from the CIA driving school, and it's not your dad."
Mhm.
So,
That's a good
you know,
line. Yep.
those, uh those moments I think were really fun for me because I it's like a little spy camp of sorts. So you're learning all these new skills, you're using your common sense, smarts, which I guess I had by the way my parents brought me up and sort of the kind of adventurous spirit that instead of getting a job right out of college, I was like, I'm going to go, live in some impoverished community and, without running water and just sort of figure things out that way. So it really was a good fit. And my language skills ended up being of use, which I thought was so funny because at the time, here we are in Afghanistan and Iraq at war, and the hot languages were the highest priority, right? So it's Urdu, Pashto, Arabic, Chinese or Mandarin, Russian, and I had my French and Spanish, and I thought, "Gosh, I'm not really that useful, am I?" But it turns out I immediately tested out, at a proficient level, so I was ready to go. I didn't have to get 2 years of language training, and I was the first one of my farm class to actually get an assignment, that the president at the time, George W. Bush, had wanted to know, like, why these Sudanese rebels had left the Darfur peace agreement, and I was just pulled up and because I had French, I was sent on my way to, like, go find rebel leaders, literally, in West Africa and ask them these questions. So those kind of adventures were what I was looking for, and I wasn't sure I was gonna get that, but I got it right out of the gates.
Well, I have many questions about going to find rebel leaders, and I'm going to get to that in just a second because this is
Yeah.
also really important to the foundation of GORUCK. So this is all tied
Mhm.
together. But you did
Yeah.
mention something I just wanted to go back to. You said you were in the Watergate building when 9/11
Mhm.
happened, and that you went to Ground Zero 2 weeks after
Yeah.
the terrorist attacks. Why were you in DC, and
Mhm.
how did you end up going to Ground Zero? Because that was an area that not a lot of folks got
Yeah.
to at the time.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I sometimes skip over important parts. So, what I didn't mention is that I graduated in 2001 from Georgetown, and my dad died 2 weeks after that, suddenly, and completely rocked our little family of 4. And I was actually slated to go to Ecuador, like, in August of that same year. I ended up, because of what happened, delaying that. I delayed my year of service. I ended up going back to it, which I'm so glad I did because there was almost something I didn't do. So I ended up working, in a marketing job, at the Watergate building, just something to do, earn some money, pay off my student loans that were piling up, and, um, and that's what I was doing at 9/11, and it wasn't my plan at all, but I'm so grateful that I went back on track to what I originally wanted to do because that year of living abroad and kind of figuring out it really changed and opened my eyes to a lot of different things. I originally thought I wanted to go to med school, and I worked in a clinic down there and decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with people. And so a lot of the work that I did was I think, like, social work, and it ended up coming up in my interviews for the agency a lot. Like, how did you get these people to trust you? How
Mhm.
did you, you know, get them to let them take care of your children or walk them to school or things like that. And I would just explain that I would just get to know them. I think there was a lot of crossover with journalism, these sorts of
Yes,
things with developing
absolutely.
sources.
I'm still wondering if, the career in the CIA for me is possible. We'll talk about that later offline. I feel like the
Yes.
more I hear these stories, I'm like, maybe I miss my calling. So, and then were you at did you go to New York City to volunteer?
Oh, right. Yes, so my best friend from the Georgetown track team had just gotten a position at ABC News,
Mhm.
and I went to go visit her and kind of see what was going on, and, we helped a little bit here and there, but so much was blocked off at that time since it was so early, but, just being around that time and, just the dust everywhere and all the missing persons, flyers in the subways, it was just an incredible, terrifying time. Being in DC and, like, that visit to New York, it was a crazy time, like, for the 3 months after, 9/11, there was just constant sirens in the streets and, you know, just police presence, law enforcement presence. The Watergate building was right next to the Saudi Arabian embassy. We constantly were having bomb threats, having to evacuate, and it eventually, settled down, but, we were all on edge, I think, for months after that attack.
I mean, you're right. It speaks to that anxiety and the fear of that time. And here we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And I hate to use that term, 25th year since. We're going to mark 25 years since the terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of emotions around that, just thinking about the time that's passed and how things have
Oh
changed. And
gosh.
but interesting to see how all of these different parts of your story, you spent some
Mhm.
time in DC, you got to see, the site of a terrorist attack up close as you could. You could get that
Yes.
feeling from
Mhm.
you had some time abroad. You had this language skill. So this is all coming together. You were a runner, so there's a
Yeah.
physical fitness was important to you and part of your life. And so
Mhm.
what happens? You get on a plane and you just land in West Africa and you're looking for rebel leaders? Like, how does one do that?
Basically,
How do you find a rebel leader? It's not like there
oh
was
my
Instagram. They were, like, posting about themselves. What did you
it
do,
is
Emily?
it is a whole story in of itself. So, like, the chief of so there's this whole thing that I could get into later, but it feels like a reality TV show in retrospect before there were even, like, those were really a big thing, but you get assi at the time, you got assigned, like, an area of the world where you were gonna be based. And normally, you go inside the building of Langley and you kinda wait, and then you get your training and then, wait for an assignment, and it's like kinda like being deployed with the military. It takes time, but for some reason, there was this pressing, need, and like I said, weren't any French speakers available. Like, it was like there was a dearth of French speakers. They were all working and, engaged elsewhere. So the chief of the division called me up, and I'm just fresh out of the farm. I'm just like a brand new baby, case officer, and like
And the farm
25
is
at
just
the
so
time.
everyone knows, the farm is a
Mhm.
CIA training facility that's referred
Yes.
to that way, so
Yes. So I was there for, almost
she wasn't
like a
actually
little
on a
under.
farm. That's what I
No, it
meant.
wasn't a farm. It was it was
It's
a
it
cool
could be
spot.
confusing.
Yeah, it could be confusing.
Yes.
It's in a lot of movies as that.
Yes.
I'm allowed to say that, but the training, it lasted quite a bit of time, and we're all just itching at this point to get out and do the real work. And the chief of division calls me in, and he was like, "Emily, I'm gonna make or break your career." And I was just like, "What is he?" And he goes, "President wants to know why why these rebels have left the Darfur Peace Agreement. I need you to go there and find them and find out." And I walked out of his office and I was like, "Hell yeah." Because you have this image of what things are gonna be like, and then you get there and you're like, "Oh, it's just another government organization," where you can't find pencils or good coffee or, it's nothing like the private sector, in good ways and bad. But I was like, "Yeah, all right, this is what I signed up for." So I had, like, less than a week before I went, and something that really stuck out to me, Jenna, was that, the whole, like, connect the dots failure of 9/11, and, the report hadn't even come out at that point, but, it was just the failure to kind of for the interagencies to talk to each other, and that was on top of my mind. So I ended up making a point to go find the 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 director, it's the basically the Intel analyst, it's a whole other division. It's not the director of operations, which is where I was. And there's a lot of feuding and, inner politics, interagency politics that goes on between those 2 places. But I had one of my other best friends from the Georgetown track team was an analyst there. So I went over and was like, "Hey, I know what you do good work. I trust you. Like, I'm gonna go find your counterpart, and go talk to them." And, it was like someone had never asked someone like, "Hey, what is it like in Sudan? Or what is it like in Chad next door? It looks like I'm gonna have to go through Chad because Sudan's not allowing, visas to get in." And I got over like, lunch in at Langley, I got just a complete education. Here are the books you need to read. There's only like 2 or 3 about this part of the world. This is what you need to know. And I was, like, scribbling all these notes, and I went to REI and bought, like, a bunch of camping and survival gear, and, a
Like,
whole time
re
Jason.
and
Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
know how much you said something to me when we were talking earlier about I forgot the
Mhm.
term about your cover. So you're able to talk about some things related to this. What was the
Oh,
term when
my
you said
cover's been rolled back.
so you're allowed to speak a little bit more
Yes.
I don't say with all
Yes.
you can't give away national secrets, but
Yeah.
you can tell us some of these things. And so if I do ask you a question where like maybe it's
Sure.
not I just want our audience to
I'll
know
let
like
you
we
know.
yeah.
Sources and methods are off the books and, of course, certain, particularities, but I
But were
am
you
at
just
this
dropped there?
point.
Were you just like, do you just land and then do
Yeah.
you like
I
what?
landed in the capital of Chad and had a whole adventure just to figure out where these rebels were. And in doing so, basically worked through other Americans that were on the ground to identify where these folks were, and then ended up getting in a small plane, you know, run by the UN, which had to corkscrew land to not get shot down by rebels. And when I got on the ground there, so staying in some UN adjacent lodging and got picked up by a black sedan with someone named Mohammed and taken to a compound which was being guarded by child soldiers with, the ammo bands on them, and sat down on the floor. I was given a Pepsi that's had, Chadi and Arabic on it, and sat down with like 12 other of these Sudanese rebels. And I just was like, "Excuse me, can you tell me why you left the Darfur peace agreement?" I literally was like,
You know what? Ask the direct question, Emily. That's what it is.
I
We're
didn't
not
know
gonna
how much
there's no
time
small
we
talk.
had,
There's no small talk. Let's get into it.
and they
You're like,
were
my boss wanted to the president of the United States is
and they
asking.
and they were like, "You tell your president, this is what we want." It was like a whole negotiation and everything. And I
Wow.
I went back and just like type, cable after cable of like, then this person said this, and then we talked about this, because you're supposed to all divide them all up because they're going to different places. And I remember everyone was like, "We can't believe you found them. we can't we can't believe you actually did the thing." And I was like, that's when I was like, wait a minute. That's not the hell yeah I was going after.
Yeah.
Like we do this stuff, right? Team America.
It's not just in the movies, guys. It actually is real. And
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
what did your do you remember what your boss said, the one that put you on that assignment once you found the
They
rebels?
gave
Did
me an award. They gave me an
yeah,
award.
good.
And I was like, "Dude, you shouldn't be giving me an award. This is the standard. Like
This is
I did the job that we were trained to do." There's, other things in there, and I think it depends on the division and where you are. I'm not saying this as a blank because my experience was particular to Africa. But I think, the bar sometimes is different in terms of what the expectations are.
well, and
Um,
as I mentioned, your time in Africa was so important to the foundation of GORUCK, and I do wanna I wanna
Mhm.
get to that transition in just a moment, but I am
Yeah.
curious if there we're actually gonna be talking about Africa a lot more in the news. I have a few
Mhm.
interviews coming up about it, and it seems to be a spot that gets ignored, and then something happens and the spotlight shifts back on and then gets
Yeah.
ignored again, and just if you could summarize, which I know could
Mhm.
be difficult to do, this was a very specific conflict you were looking at. Are there any sort of takeaways you could share with your audience about
Yeah.
being on the ground in Africa? A lot of us are not gonna get that experience. I mean, certainly not the experience of corkscrewing on a plane and
Yeah.
talking to rebel leaders, but just in general, being in the environment that could help make us a little bit smarter about that part of the world.
Gosh, that's such a astute question, Jenna, and it's something that not I don't get asked a lot, but people forget how huge that continent is and the storied history and the diversity that exists on it. Like I always tell everyone, like I'm having my kids now, I'm running, helping run Go Ruck and doing things, but I kind of can't wait to get back there at some point in my life because the work there was just so it's amazing. There's so much good work to be done, and I don't mean that in a white man's burden sort of way. I mean that in like a real, you know, getting to know the locals, getting to know their culture, getting to understand it better, and to, I mean, there's so many interesting people that you meet along the way, just it's like in Roald Dahl, his biography, Going Solo, autobiography, he wrote it, um, and it's just like the crazy people you meet there. I mean, I met this guy who would always wear an eye patch from England, and he was, in the furniture business, but he was really set on trying to figure out ways to, like, grow fish, like, farm fish, because he was like, "The planet is hungry," and I think about this a lot, like, about food shortages and, you know, uh, the what's going to happen when you have all these people that are in need of actually the basic necessities. So
So
I
it's a good reminder because when we say Africa, we could, and as you mentioned, there's all sorts of things that could come to mind, but sometimes we're not as specific about which country we're talking about.
yeah,
Africa is a continent, not just not a country, and but
yeah,
because of just the way that the limited access a lot of us have had there. Uh, it you're it's easy to kind of pick up something and, like, put it on top like a template and not think about all the different dynamics that are
yeah.
played there and just how big it is. I was able to go to South Africa,
Oh, nice.
um, many, many years ago. It was actually really, really key, that experience, to the
Mhm.
decision that I ended up making to leave the mainstream, quote, unquote, "traditional media." It was part of the experience
Really?
of being there. Yeah, it was just it's just a very powerful place. I don't know how to
Mhm,
put words to it
mhm.
precisely. It was the distance, but also the magic that was in that particular country, that separated me enough to have
Yeah,
distance to think a little bit more critically. So, definitely,
yeah.
look forward to you going back and hearing more about
Yeah,
your
me too.
adventures for sure. So you're stationed there. This is
Mhm.
where your home base is, but Jason, your husband, is serving somewhere else, and he gets
Yes.
to come and visit you. And this is tell us the story behind, "Hey, do you have a backpack ready to go?" Is
Yes.
that and this is that and this is how the company started. Tell us
Yeah.
this story.
We we had a going away party for I think it was me, and he was like gave a toast to say, "This might be the first ever Basra Abidjan relate long distance relationship," and I don't know if that's totally true, but at the time it felt like it. But yes, so he was, at war in Iraq, and, for most of like, for a large part of that time when I was there, and one of his R&Rs, his rest and relaxation times, he would, instead of going home to Florida, where we're from, he would come visit me, where I was living in West Africa, and, at the first time he came there, he had the same reaction that a lot of folks coming out of the green zone and coming out of that war, zone thought. They were like, this is crazy here, like it feels dangerous, but you have total freedom of movement, which was just really a little unsettling to them. But for me, it was the only thing I really understood at the time. And just as a side note, I just want to say, Jenna, that like before I was home based for Africa, which is really I really wanted to go because my mentors had said, "Hey, a small station in Africa, you get to do everything," and they were totally right. But before that, I was thinking practically, like, "Hey, I don't have kids yet. I'm going to get this war tour out of my way." So I had signed up actually for Afghanistan and or Iraq to serve there, but I didn't get picked for that, although a lot of my colleagues did out of the gates. But Jason shows up and he's like completely like, "Whoa, you need a GORUCK." And I was like, "I don't know what that is." And so brought he had a bunch of his, government issued gear because they get a whole bunch of like really top of the line stuff. And he had this London Bridge med med pack that opened like a clamshell and had all these neat organizational pouches. And so he just kitted it out to be this go bag, this go ruck for me. Um, and I had one for my car, one for my house that had everything I would need if I had had to lead quickly, which, a couple times almost happened um, when you have a lot of instability and there's coup attempts and whatnot. I was lived across the street from a former prime minister, and one day I came and there was just a complete, 500-person deep riot just happening right there. So I just turned my car around and went elsewhere with my dog. Um, and that was the spark. That was the spark. Of course, at the time, it was more of a like, "Hey, a survival bag," sort of mentality. Like, "Hey, this is be cool to," and because we had other people see it within the embassy, the US Embassy and other embassies, so they asked him if he could build them one too. So we were like, "Huh, that could be something you could do while you transition out of the army and come join me, in this job, and we can actually live together." Because this was we spent 5 years of our first marriage, living apart. So that was just sort of this, like, this young person, like, "Hey, maybe you could do this, keep you busy while we're trying to figure out our lives." And who would have thought it would have been where we are today as a fitness category and carrying weight based on his training as a special forces,
So
soldier.
you mentioned something there, your first marriage, which I'm gonna get to. I'm
Yeah,
making a note. First marriage, same person, guys, but this is the first part of their marriage, and we'll get to that in a moment. But what can you give us a timeline? So between
yeah.
when Jason comes and is like, "Hey, you need to have a go ruck in an
Mhm,
emergency. This is the backpack you're gonna throw on your back. And if you got to get to an airport, you got to get across the border. This is what you're gonna do."
mhm.
As we talked about, Emily, I had a very similar experience with my former Navy SEAL husband when he moved to New York City with me. Probably unnerved him for different reasons than West Africa, but he was like, "You don't have an emergency?" I'm like, "I have a first aid kit, I have water." I grew up in San Francisco, so, if there was an earthquake, I was gonna be fine, but
Right.
he's like, "No, if you needed to leave the city, like, if you needed to walk out of here, do you have anything?" And I was like, "Of course not." So he built us these backpacks,
Mhm.
and very similarly, some of our friends also were thinking, "Oh, we don't have any of that either." So it's interesting to get that
Yeah.
military veterans perspective on life because there are things that are definitely taught in the military that can transfer, but maybe in unexpected ways if you don't have that bridge.
Right.
So what was the time between, okay, we're serving our country in this particular way, and then now we're actually starting a company called GORUCK?
Yeah. It it was not so what happened first is that he started building because if you know Jason, he likes to do everything the hard way. He decided he was not just gonna buy a bag, he was gonna design the perfect bag, the bag that could work in Baghdad as well as New York City. And 2 years later, and that 2 years was basically when our marriage was, disintegrating, and by the time that bag was probably the first version was finished, we were officially annulled, our first marriage. But still very much in touch. We had a dog that we kind of shared and, it
And were
involved
you
in each
both
other's
abroad at the
lives.
time still? Was it the time apart and all the stress attached to that and
Ah,
that led to
most
that
of it
dissolution?
Most of it was abroad. Then he, got out of the military and then, was actually planning to join me where I was. He came, it didn't work out. He moved back to New York, stayed with some friends on their couches. I ended up extending my tour, stayed an extra year there, and then was getting ready to go back and get some language training and go to a different post. So I was like, kind of like, hey, my career is
Different
is is
paths.
going is
Mhm.
going on, and I didn't want to. We were in a power struggle. I'll admit on whose career, how we're going to make this work, and I was sort of like, I'm not leaving mine, sort of thing. So we've since sorted that out, but the bag that was created was called GR1, and you know he made all these bags made in the USA at the time, and there was like that and like a hat. And so on the website, and no one wanted to buy these things. They were very expensive. They were overbuilt. They were really tough, um, and like durable. And so he had all this inventory and he decided that he was going to show how tough the bag was by filling it with bricks and going to do the first ever Tough Mudder. Um, that was, I believe, in Pennsylvania. And he did that with a bunch of his Green Beret friends.
And that's like an obstacle course. I've actually done a Tough
Mhm.
Mudder, believe it or not, Emily. I know it may not
Yeah,
look like
nice.
it, but I
Me
did do
too.
one. And it's like a pretty intense obstacle course,
Yeah.
with a lot of mud. So there you go,
Yeah.
Tough Mudder.
Mud,
It was
yeah.
fun. It was
It
fun,
was at
but it was
the
hard.
beginning of that mud run craze, the
Yes.
OCR, the obstacle course relay craze, and that in and of itself was sort of like GORUCK kind of grew up in that with that trend. So in fact, the founder of the Tough Mudder got with Jason and said, "Hey, I want you to do more of this to get people excited about the Tough Mudders." And so out of that, Jason created this special day in the life of a special forces training, which was a really tough event. No details forthcoming. Show up on a street corner at 1 a.m. He called it Fight Club with backpacks. And the first one was in San Francisco, and then the second and third ones were in New York, which I showed up for the New York one. I actually sorry, the second one was in DC, which I helped him plan because he came to me and said I was back in DC at that point, getting ready to go to another post. And he said, "I need your help planning this." And I was like, "Fine, I'll help you." So he did that. There was only like 4 or 5 people that showed up to that one in DC, but he had a lot of people showing up in New York, and I just it was the same weekend as the New York Marathon, in fact, and I ended up being like, "You know what? I'm gonna show him that I can do these stupid events of his." And so I flew up to New York with some friends that were planning to run the marathon, and I ended up doing the 3rd ever Go Ruck Challenge event. I didn't tell him this at the time because we were kind of at odds with each other, but I it was actually really fun. It was hard, but not impossible. It got harder as it went on, but, like, what was hard is that he put us in the Hudson River at in November when it was, like, 17 degrees outside,
Oh.
waited for us all to get changed into dry clothes and then put us back in it. So, one guy had to drop because of hypothermia. It was just sort of like this, like, h are you this mindset of stress inoculation and whatnot. So, that was the birth of the Go Ruck challenge, and there's something about it, is that it created this little buzz, and, it went from Jason showing up with all these bags hoping that people would like them by trying them out, and he would go to Home Depot and get a bunch of bricks and have them fill there, to eventually, "People, you bring your own bricks. Oh, yeah, now you gotta buy the bag," and it just sort of started taking off because of the events. People were excited to do something like this. It was at this time, 2010, right? You had the financial crisis, you know, companies were dying off, new ones were coming up. You also had this, like I said, this mud run kind of thing. You had us very much engaged as a military overseas. And so Jason had tapped into his, SF brothers. "Hey, help me come lead these events." And so they would do this when they were either on R&R or, waiting for their next deployment, or they had just gotten out like Jason and looking for a way to kind of stay connected. So it was just this like crazy, time.
And
of
also
all
the
this stuff
rise of
together.
social media, thinking back
Yeah,
at that time,
yeah.
suddenly now people are on Twitter and now there's Instagram. People are more active on Facebook and using those in ways that they weren't
Brand new.
necessarily.
But even more so than that, Jenna, was that our GORUCK started off entirely online, which was prescient at the time too,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
There was no brick and mortar. It was just everything, and we still are to this day completely 100% an e-commerce company. And yeah, and a lot of it was the blogosphere. Jason, this was completely not planned, but here he is, like brokenhearted, know, blogging about, basically his life being in the toilet and nothing going right and traveling, that summer of 2010, he basically took our dog and went on a trip to 48 states trying to sell these bags and lead events and stuff. And it was a complete another failure. Like no one wanted
Okay,
it.
so then but so
Yeah.
just so the folks know if they're totally new to this story, now you have a thriving company. You've held events
Yeah.
all over the world. You have
Yeah.
all sorts of different packs that people can wear, can use in a variety of different
Mhm.
activities. What how did it go from our marriage is over, Jason is struggling, clearly. You're like, "I
Yeah.
might go somewhere else. Peace
Yeah.
out. I'm out. I kind of want my dog, but you took him to the 48 states."
Yeah.
How did it this does not sound like it's going to
It
end in victory. Emily,
it
what was the turnaround? What
no
was the
one
tipping
thought it
point?
was going
Yeah.
to. No one thought it was going to. Like, we had started GoRuck with our little deployment seed money. You know what I mean? Like stuff we had saved by you know, l living on the government's dime,
Mhm.
and not having a lot of expenses, and yeah, it's wild. We think about it, we look back on it, we both would probably still be serving in the government if this hadn't have taken hold, and, we I just think that we tapped into something.
So what was
Just
that thing? Was there a moment when you thought, "Oh, wait a minute. Now this is turning around and I'm not going to take this second post and maybe I'm gonna remarry this guy." Like, there's those were a
well,
lot of things
that took
together
a
at the
little
same time.
longer. The company started taking off. And I was always sort of like tangentially involved, like the scavenger hunts, a lot of the events that I think are the more accessible ones are things that I had like designed and done. But, Jason was really focusing a lot on his special forces past. But it just was that it was fun stuff to do. Like we had this whole spy games event that we did. There was just reasons to kind of stay in touch and whatnot. And, I'd ended up going and living and working in Brazil after that. Um, um, and had another relationship that didn't work out and moved back. And uh, it was this weird thread that Go Ruck was this thing that kept bringing Jason and I back together, and it wasn't always pretty. Like, I came back from Brazil and I said, "Hey, I need a little bit of a soft landing. Can I work part-time? Can I do more?" He said, "Sure." I mean, we've known each other since we were 15. Like, like, sometimes you can just have that sort of friendship of like, "Hey, I know it's not great. We're not, like, dating anymore or married, but we can still be friends." And I think there's something to that and that how I we've been able to make it through a lot of tough times. And so the thing is, I think what happened, Jenna, is that there was just still things to do with GoRuck, and we both like to work. We both like to serve, and you know, we thought these events were really we're hearing from people that they were like, affecting them in really positive ways. Like,
Mhm.
"Hey, this reconnected me with a community when I needed it most, when I was going through a really dark time, or I was really unhealthy, and this got me back energized again and felt, I hated rucking when I was in the military, but this seemed fun," sort of thing. And it was that type 2 fun that people sort of love to hate, right? And but it was the bond. That it was this community bond that we were all kind of sucked into. And, um, at the time, there was just a lot of ups and downs with our personal relationship, but eventually we did get back together. And I don't normally share this story because it's very private, but, um, and so the one of the so we had been trying to get back together, and it just was like fits and starts. Like, eh, we, I can't get into that, but it just was, like, not working. Like, we'd try, and then it wouldn't go well, and, like, it just we were both having a hard time. He was living in a team house, with a bunch of Green Berets, and I was, like, a single mom, and just, like, our lives were very different at that time. So I was just sort of like, "Okay, maybe I'm gonna leave GORUCK, and I'm gonna go get a job, with a humanitarian organization, go back to Africa, and just be
Mhm.
a single mom and live this adventurous life that I've, kind of wanted to do anyway." And I was submitting resumes and doing that process, and what happened was this terrible tragedy struck at one of our events in Syracuse. Just this terrible accident in that a driver fell asleep at the wheel and ended up going way off the road, ended up hitting a participant in one of our events. So we had our first casualty ever, and it was just terrible. Like, you know, this young, you know, dad of 3, just an amazing guy in the community, and, it just really affected us deeply. Jason basically showed up at the house I was renting and said he was in tears. He came to me to tell me this, and we ended up both going. So, at this time, all this people were actually reaching out to Jason being like, "Don't say anything, don't make any statements, don't go to the funeral, protect yourself, get a lawyer." And I was like, "No." And he was like, "I don't feel right about that." I was like, "We're gonna go to the funeral, and what happens, happens." And we went to that funeral. I'm so glad we did. It was this amazing outpouring from this town for this, individual. Met his widow, met his children, met his family. We're still in touch with them today. Like, and we were just sort of like, "You know what? They're gonna do what they need to do as a family, and we'll just deal with it. We don't care about, what's the business thing to do." So, out of that, it was a really tough time, but Jason and I grew closer, and we ended up, moving in together and having a kid, and it was like there were some rough moments, but it's crazy to think that, like, out of such a terrible tragedy, I'm just, like, kind of it's a miracle that that's what brought us back together in a real way, was that, coming together and realizing that we actually agreed on something really fundamental about how to handle this really important decision with GORUCK.
Wow, that is an incredible story, and thank you for sharing it because it is, um there are so many ups and downs to life,
Yeah,
and as we're I mean, that's such a kind of generic statement, but I think anyone
no, but it's
listening or
true.
anyone watching can appreciate that you what you think is gonna happen often doesn't, and the twists and turns that you experience in your own story are very difficult to
Mhm.
predict. And
Yeah.
that's where, the hard work comes in and the values and the faith and whatever that means to you in a variety of different ways. Faith in yourself, another person, something bigger,
Yeah.
um, and can produce something really beautiful even through
Yeah.
the tough moments. And
Mhm.
that's what when you're talking about GORUCK, I mean, that's what I really think about. I think about the core story of the initial GORUCK and the desire to bring people together, bring them outside, get them active, take something from the military that seems pretty
Mhm.
basic. You're gonna walk around a lot with something heavy on your back
Yes,
and
right.
translate it to the community at large, the country at large, and beyond the country because
Yeah.
it's good for you. And now
Yeah.
when we're saying this here in 2025, it's like, oh yeah, I see people walking with backpacks and the way to vest all the time. This is just what we do. But this is not what everyone did. This is what GoRuck did.
No,
And you
it's
guys are really
true.
at the start of that. I mean, and I know there's a lot of different companies now, but I do want our
Mhm.
audience to know is that y'all were first and you were the pioneers in that and
Yeah.
doing this translation from the military to the mainstream. And so
It was
what do you
yeah.
think is the magic behind it? Because it is simple, right? It's like put something heavy
Yeah.
on, go for a walk. It's going to change your life.
It it's the accident of it all, Jenna. You know what I mean? It was just like, yes, we were, you know, high striving, young kids trying to serve our country, trying to do the right thing, completely messed up, you know,
As we all
completely
did.
ended
Yes.
up on our rear ends being like, I am so humbled. I've basically hit rock bottom and got sort of realized, that this shared experience of putting weight in your and carrying weight together somehow made it less heavy.
Mm.
And um so that community really lifted us up, and we feel an enormous debt and very grateful to all the people along the way that have helped kind of build this community and basically democratize rucking and from the military, because we like to say, like, the threshold was crossed on that first event in San Francisco, September 26, 2010. That's when rucking officially left the military and, became an actual different way to get fit, or, reach, do other social fitness to connect with others. So it's it's kind of wild to think of it as that this came about, but it was just a confluence of things happening at the time, and here we are now 15 years later. And during that 15 years time, I want to say, like, in around 2012, 2013, a colleague of mine from the agency was going through some personal stuff. She needed a soft landing. So I said, "Come work with us." And she was very adamant about, you have to educate people about this. We need to educate, but the world wasn't ready for that yet. But it started a conversation where Jason and myself and others, especially at GORUCK, started to say, well, we know what the benefits are. We're feeling it. We're seeing it in real action. It's physical, it's mental, it's social, and but we don't have any, like, studies on it. We don't have the backing of experts on this, except in the military. They did some testing on it, but it's hard to get access to that, or if it was just very limited, and the scope was different. So this was started in 2012, 2013, this long process of creating the white paper, of, like, going. Jason visited the top back doctor, asked him specifically, "Is it good to load your spine?" And he was like, "Yes." Obviously, there's exceptions to that if you've got other things going on, but yes, most people, the human body is this amazing, machine that can actually that gets better the more you use it, not less. And so basically it was like, talking to these fitness experts, talking to psychiatrists, talking to all these different types of people. And it was right in 2015, I believe, Michael Easter wrote an article about rucking and men's health. And you should have seen when that came out. Jason was like going around with this magazine being like, "He gets it, he gets it." We were like celebrating. We're like, "Oh, it's happening. People are gonna get it." Well, we weren't ready. World wasn't ready. He had done a GORUCK event and got interested in it and researched and wrote this article. And it was, just a kind of a topical one, but he was starting on that path. And so Jason kind of stayed in touch with him and kept bugging him, like, "Write a book on wrecking, write a book on wrecking." And I like to think that Michael Easter did one better. He wrote a book about the comfort crisis,
Mm.
about all these different ways that our life has gotten a little too easy and less happy as a result, or less healthy as a result. And in doing so, he did all these cool things. If you read the book, he goes to Bhutan, he goes on a hunt in the Arctic, and then he told us later that when he was writing the book, he realized that he was rucking when he had gone hunting in the Arctic, and he needed to kind of round this out. And he came and visited in this room I'm in now, our guest room, and talked and rucked with Jason as they took our 2-year-old to preschool one day, and basically included, the last chapter was about rucking. And I think that just opened it up. And now Since then, there's been all sorts of, like you said, fitness experts weighing in and saying, this is good for your body. These are the reasons why you should be doing this. There's bone density reasons. There's, it helps your posture. It actually, engages your core muscles. It lets you get into zone 2. It's like active resistance training. So if you're not like someone that wants to go to the gym, here are some ways to like build muscle, also get in a little bit of cardio. And it's basically taking something so basic as walking and adding a little bit more to it. So we like to say, if you can walk, you can ruck.
Why do you like it?
Yeah. I I like it because as a runner, that's really nice of you to ask me that. As a runner, I love running. I've been a runner like most of my life, ran in college, ran after college. I still coach my daughter's cross country team. And it's something so beautiful, and I love the community that comes out of it. But as I get older, I see what the older, like, runner body looks like,
Mhm.
and I see all the injuries, and I see now the science of, like, muscle mass is so hard to build after age 30, and I wanna do what, like, Peter Attia says, it's like, I want that last part of my life to be a high quality, and so it's great for me because 'cause I'm not a gym rat. I know a lot of people like that. I just like being outside. I don't really wanna have another thing I have to drive to get to. It's just too much for me. I like things that I can do easily. Um, and I mean, I try new things all the time just to see. I love yoga, but I like it outside. Like I don't like to have to feel like I'm gonna miss the door closing or something and feel
Yes.
bad for myself. I hate that. We are lucky
I
we
do
live
too.
like yeah. It's like the worst thing.
Or you get the wrong spot in the yoga studio
Oh, yeah.
and you're too crowded. I do love
Yeah.
yoga, but these are things that do
It's
go through my mind when I
yeah.
go to the class. It's
Yeah,
different than
and it
being
has its
outside.
time. Yeah,
Yes.
I totally agree. I've picked up surfing in the last, like, 6 years, which I love, which I'm not great at, but it's really relaxing and fun to try something new, but rucking is something I can do with other people. I can do it with my mom, you know? She can, put on, like, 8 pounds and, she's 73. I can do it with people of all different fitness types. I can do it with my kids. I can do it with Jason. He rocks. We did a big hike this summer. We did 100 miles on the John Muir Trail. And man, he can just I consider myself a decent endurance athlete. I cannot hang with him, but he just carried more weight. And so we were equals because of that. So the scalability of it all is probably in the way that you can I mean, as a runner, I can tell you I people will be like, "Oh, I don't wanna run with you." And I'm like, I'm not running like I did in college, and I know I had certain times when I was in my 20s, but I'm not doing that now, but people are funny about that, right? It's
Yes.
not
Mhm.
often a comfortable way, like and you have to be pretty fit to have a conversational pace, I
Yes.
think, at running.
Yes.
So and running is perishable, like, the cardio you build up is I if you don't keep it up within 2 weeks, you're back at square one.
That's
And
depressing.
it's hard when you're a busy person
Well, it's
trying
funny. So
to
that brings us to the SPY RUCK. So you have all of
yeah,
this experience now. We have more than a decade. I mean, really, what are we looking at? 15 years since that 2010 moment that
more than that. We were
more than that,
rucking before
obviously.
GORUCK came around, yeah, mhm,
Yes. So
20
you
years.
have all of this experience. And now we do see, and it's become, kind of like a running joke online as well. The women now, because women, we get all the extra tasks. They're like, walking isn't enough. You need to do weighted walking. And we can understand all the benefits, but it
Yeah,
really feels like a long list of things that we all have to do. But when I saw the Spyruck, my
yes,
genuine reaction to it, and I don't have a weighted vest that I
mhm,
use that I should probably, considering all the health benefits. I was like, oh, that's something that I would wear. And I could wear it underneath my sweatshirt if I wanted to be a little bit more
yeah,
discreet about it. But I also thought of my mom. It's funny that you mentioned your mom because
mhm,
my mom's active. She gets out and walks, and just that little extra bit of weight would probably be great for her,
yes,
for all of us. And it looks
yes,
easy to put on. So tell me,
yeah,
where did the idea for the Spy Ruck? How is it different than other things that
yeah,
are out there? I'm just curious the backstory since you are the
sure.
spy.
Yeah,
SPY
I know.
RUCK. So
We
put it all
did that on
together.
purpose.
Yes, yes.
Um, yes.
Smart.
Uh, so so we've been tinkering with gear specific for women for a long time because we started out with a rucksack, the GR1, which is actually like a better everyday carry, but now it evolved to the rucker, and we're just women. Sometimes we're saying like, I don't like the way it fits, or I don't like the way it feels, or some women were like, I'm good. I like this. Carry on. But I you know, we started tinkering with the straps, different sizes of the straps. We created a ruck plate carrier for, trying to reach more women. That was just, it just can hold like a ruck plate in it. So it's very streamlined and kind of lower profile. But what happened a few years ago is that one of my GORUCK colleagues, he asked me to lead his daughter's Girl Scout troop in a ruck. And so I piled up a bunch of our different gear, different weights, because these were, young girls and their moms that were going to go on it. And I got there and, sorted it all out. And, the young girls immediately were like, they grabbed their bag, they put in the weight they wanted, and they put it on. They were ready to go. And the moms in this community were like, I'm not sure. They were just hemming and hawing. They didn't love the way it was hard for them to get the right feel. I was like having to like, really, walk them through each time. And during that moment, I had this like epiphany where I was like, I gotta meet these ladies where they're at. Like this is a bridge too far right now. And that's okay. Like they're not the ones that want to be, jumping in the Hudson and crawling through mud and doing these things that they're like, but they want to get fit. They want to ruck, but we are not meeting them where they're at. So I came back from that and I told my colleague, I was like, I had a great experience. Guess what? We're gonna build this other thing. And so it takes us a long time to build things at Gora because we have really high standards for the quality and durability, and we back it with our lifetime guarantee. And so lots of iterations, lots of process, lots of different materials. We wanted something that was going to be sleek and slow profile, but comfortable when you put it on. We got materials that we knew would be non-toxic and not odorless, and just like microbial. Lots of different things. We got the inside to be something that's rust proof. So there were other sort of ones on the market that we saw and just said we can offer people something better, and we should, because we've been at this for a long time. So, and we took a lot of the lessons of things that we've already tried and applied them. And it was like an all-female design team here in the US at our headquarters in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And then in Vietnam we have an all-female team there. And it was really cool for me to actually say, hey, this is going to be a product that's for women, and designed by women, and we're going to actually carry this through. And this is the first time that whole process had taken place like that. We were finally in this place as a company that was, founded on SF roots, because at the time I was not able to talk about my background, and to actually, be clear about how this process went. So it took, the better part of a couple years. But I went this summer to Vietnam for the first time to visit our factories. It was such a great experience meeting everyone and talking about, making the decisions and whatnot, and just really grateful to have had that experience. And now that it's out, that we officially launched, we did it at this cool Spyscape experience in New York, and then flew to Venice Beach to do something with our partners, Arnold Pump Club, to do a ruck there. And it it just was, I think we nailed it. Like, I think we got a product that women were looking for, and of course, we will iterate. This is something you can count on us to do. We will continue to tweak the design or add, more. So what we heard is immediately like, can you make it in 20 pounds? Can you make it in 24? And that's really cool because, it shows you like the women out there, they want to be challenged. They want more. So yes, the answer is yes, we're gonna keep trying to figure out a way to do that. But what was really cool for me along the way in testing, and then actually when I was, putting it on all these women in New York for the first time, was they immediately, when they put it on, they said, "Oh, I feel like it's making my posture better." And then some of them said, "I forgot I had it on." And, one of them actually, you said you could wear it under a jacket or a
Yeah.
sweatshirt. One of them actually took a picture of a, or the video of her at Whole Foods. She's like, "You don't even know, but I've got my SPY RUCK
Well,
under
I would
here."
I could wear it to the little league, when you're sitting on the
Yeah,
sidelines for a couple hours. I'm like, why not just a little added benefit here if I'm gonna be standing out here anyways? Like, let's put on
stay
a little weight.
standing, walk around, you might as well. It's comfortable, and I had it even one someone say, "It feels like a weighted blanket." And I was like, "These are the kind of things that I wanted to
Yeah,
hear," and that
that's
was what I
really
was
good
looking
feedback.
for.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it also just an interesting evolution just as you're talking. I'm thinking about here you were at the beginning of this story with GORUCK having to be very undercover, quite frankly. And now,
Mhm.
many years later, you're forward leaning and you're out in front of this special campaign. And it's a way to get you back into the story again at that lead
Yeah,
spot as the co-founder of this company. I only have a
yeah.
couple more questions and I'll let you go. You've been so generous with your time. But one of the things you said, and I'm curious how it went with you leading this project, you said that you and Jason figured out how, where there was a power struggle before for your different careers,
Yeah.
that you've been able to figure something out that's worked for you. And I'm curious if you could talk to that because I think that's a struggle for a lot of married folks, including in our household. We're both entrepreneurs. It is hard
Yeah,
to balance, and you got kids, and you got interests, and there's life.
I know.
So what has worked? Maybe if there's one thing that's worked for
Yeah.
you, what's worked? What's one thing? It doesn't have to be everything.
Oh gosh, it's let me think. I think I mean, one, I'm very feel very blessed to be a mother. I love that aspect of my life. I can't imagine not having that, and that those early years, it's just nature that they're very dependent on on the mother. And, Jason was around and present, but there was an imbalance there. And, as they get older and more independent, it's hard, I think, for that, mostly the moms, but, whatever parents had to hang back, it's hard to figure out who you are again and
Mhm.
that identity. And I think something that I did was just I started just taking those chances. I saw other women doing that, and I, said, "I can do that too." And it was less of like an ask permission and more of a, "I'm gonna do this." And I know it's gonna be okay. And so we're at this point where, um, Jason is now kind of stepped up as being like a coach for our 2 boys. And, whereas like his tendency is to like work, it's just keep working the whole time, he has this natural break. So I actually think that, you know, just finding that balance, and it's not always gonna be equal, right? And
Mhm.
it's a fight, and I don't have it all figured out, but it it is important for us all to have our own identities that are independent of a caretaker or these different roles we play. Like, I'm very happy to be a mother, I'm happy to be a wife, but, under all that, at the end of the day, I'm still Emily, who did these other things, and I know these are sacrificial years, but what's gonna happen later, So I want to encourage, parents and especially women, like, start now. Start making some of this time for yourself and remember those things that bring you joy.
Oh, that's so good. And I love what you said about asking, not asking permission, leaning what because right? You're like, the 3 kids are here and this is over here, and then he's doing this. Can I go out and take a walk? And you're like, no, I'm gonna go take a walk now. Everyone's okay. Everything's gonna be fine. 30 minutes is
Ye
all I
And
need.
that's not just him, that's a lot of that was me,
That's what I'm
right?
saying though, 100%. And
Yeah.
I was having a conversation actually, she's a very, very good friend of mine, and very integral to Smarter News, and, very, very strong views about, womanhood, and you should definitely call
Mhm.
herself a feminist, like, but said, "How does that happen? Suddenly you have children and suddenly you start." I didn't think I thought this would be different, but now I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
do these little things that I shouldn't be asking permission for. But it's
Yeah.
hard. I don't know. I don't have the secret to success there either.
No.
But one of the things I'm hearing as a journalist and what you're talking about is like the story arc is long. It's not,
Yes.
and it
Yes.
develops and it doesn't always happen at the pace that you want, but there's going to be these periods where you do have these openings to do the things and take your story where you want it to go and be
That's really
back in the driver's seat. So it's
yeah.
a it's a really good reminder of that. Let me ask you this final question. As you reflect on your service for the country and you
Mhm.
reflect on what you've been able to achieve as an entrepreneur too, it is, we are going to be airing this during Veterans Day, but I mean, really it applies at any time. It just kind of gave us that little extra hook. Like I said, a little injustice that I wanted to right in the world in our own crusade. But as you reflect on that, how do you think about, you know, not only where you are right now, but where the country is, and how
Mhm.
do you feel about your past service and how it has now served you in this way?
Mhm. I think about service a lot, and I think that service informs most, if not all of the things that we do at GORUCK. I mean, sure, it's a business and we have to keep the lights on sort of thing, but at the end of the day, we look at, um, the Northern Star for us is not how much money and profit we can make, it's how much can we actually give back. Like, you know, Patagonia model, where they actually have set this up to they have it they have a s it's structured to be giving back, and they have their cause, and, we have ours. We modeled our 1% for those who serve after their they're basically setting a model that we admire, and we're gonna do it for the causes that are near and dear to us, which are veterans and is serving our country because better for worse, this is where this is our home. This is who we are, and we want to protect it, and we want to encourage people to serve it as well. Because I believe that is really it really changes your mindset. I didn't always agree with what our US policy decisions were when I was in a diplomatic role or, in an agency role working at embassies and meeting other foreign dignitaries. But I would sit there and have these conversations and say, I know we don't have it all right, but you have to remember that the United States is one of the greatest experiments that the world has ever seen. And because of what happened almost 250 years ago, other countries have been able to find their independence and actually create be more true to themselves and to their cultures. And so I like to keep that in check. And yes, things things are not always going to go well, and there's a lot of division. But something that I think GoRuck we've really worked hard to do within our community and beyond is to walk a fine line to say that you know, we just want you to we want you just to know your neighbor, and you don't have to agree with them on anything, but you can actually, ruck beside someone. You can carry the weight with someone and have respect for them on a very basic level, and still disagree in other areas, but we can still find areas that we have in common.
Oh, that was beautifully said, and it makes me wanna just go get my SPY RUCK right now. Emily, here we go, outside. It's a beautiful day.
Yes.
I feel like I'm in it now. I've, been recruited, and I'm ready for spy school and the SPY RUCK. Thank you, but that was
Gotcha.
very, yeah, you got it. Nailed it. Alright.
Just kidding.
Yes. I know I speak for others in saying that. Well, thank you. This
Yeah.
is really, you have an incredible story. It's a spy story. It's a love story. It's a success story. It's an American story, and I'm very grateful that you spent some time sharing it with us. So, Emily, thank you very much, and I look forward to spending some more time together again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you for believing in quick, concise, nonpartisan, smarter news. Every time you join us or share or save our content, you help us build a solution in news, and we are so grateful. We have a few other ways you can support our mission, from joining our insider community Scoop, to shopping our gear at our Smarter shop, to just telling a friend. The best way to do any of this is to visit smarternews.com or follow us at Smarter News on social media. Don't worry, we put all of this in the captions so it's easy for you. Plus, we added our email just in case you want to drop us a note. We always love hearing from you. Thank you for helping us deliver news smarter.